Hi, I'm Chris Lockhart. Welcome to the podcast. Today, I'm joined by Bill Bensing, Phil Yanoff, and Shashi Shramali, and we're actually tackling a pretty interesting topic. It basically was positioned as this: is Agile bullshit or not? So we actually took different positions on it, went back and forth, and I think had a pretty reasonable conclusion at the end. So hope you like this episode. Be sure to go to the website at www.consultantsayingthings.com. And also go search for us on YouTube and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thanks again. Hope you enjoy the episode.
So the premise is this, that Agile is a bullshit consulting jargon used to sell services. Is that right, Bill?
Yes.
Care to elaborate?
Do I care?
Quad Eric demonstratum, right? QED, done.
Absolutely. You just got to take it at face value, and I say yes, it's done. Yes. So Agile is bullshit, and I'm gonna start with that and work into my argument. It's funny. I mean, how many companies have you been to that claim to be Agile and are Agile, or how many Agile transformations have you done? I remember, and the reason I think it's bullshit is because, and it's not just because like I've had organizations with mine belong to that have failed with it. But it's interesting why it's bullshit and why I believe the consulting industry, to a large degree, I'm going to be very careful because I do think there's some folks out there who can probably do this well. But that's why Agile is bullshit, is because it just can't be done well. I got
okay.
Thoughts on why I'm going into it.
Challenge. There's a challenge there, right? The challenge has got to be, one, whoever is implementing Agile doesn't fully understand it, or two, they understand it, but they're not implementing it correctly, right? It can't be completely bullshit, is it?
Yep, it is not.
Shashi, you've seen Agile. I know you have.
So it is not bullshit completely. What's bullshit is the way it is being used, or the way the practitioners use that. So I would agree, like probably, and I'm just going to throw percentages, probably 80% of what people do is bullshit, because they use that as an excuse not to follow process. When you have chaotic environment, you would say that, oh, we are Agile. You know what? We don't want to do all those standard requirements gathering approval process. We just want to get requirements and put it in production. In my mind, that's not what you call being Agile. I feel sometimes companies want to get on this bandwagon of Agile, but culturally they have not, set up themselves to adopt Agile in the right way, and eventually they end up failing. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So, Bill, does that resonate, or you are talking about something completely different?
No, it absolutely resonates. And Shashi, I got to point out that did you know that 83.5% of statistics are made up on the spot?
Ah, that's true. See, that's what I did right now. You don't need to do any research.
It was Agile. It was an Agile, metric. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully have a happy customer. So Josh, you said one thing. They talk about they don't understand Agile. Let me ask anybody this. What is the background of Agile? Where did Agile come from?
Would you care to tell us?
Well, I want to hear, where did Agile come from? Like, does anybody have it? Does anybody know where Agile come? Okay.
All right. So I'll give you my best shot at this.
Okay.
Agile has its roots in the Toyota method of Kanban carts and lean practices for quickly and rapidly standing things up with a continuous improvement cycle, and not endlessly belaboring a discovery phase of a year and a half to get requirements, but to rapidly deploy things in a lean fashion, right? For software development or other product development. At least that's how I've seen it described before. Wrong?
I wish that was the truth, but what if I told you it was way more simple?
What if I told you blue pill, red pill? Tell me more.
Like, it was just a group in 2001. It was just a group of guys who sat down. A lot of them started a lot of written around the books around Agile, like Jeff Sutherland, who wrote the book about Scrum. I think you guys know the name Kent Beck, Rob Martin, Uncle Bob. These guys, Martin Fowler, sat around. I think it was around 2001, and I want to recall. I think I forget which country it was. I want to say it was like Norway, but don't correct me on the country. And they came up with this thing called an Agile Manifesto. It has four main concepts and 12 pillars. Did you know that?
I did not.
So
Doesn't sound very agile to me, by the way.
doesn't sound very agile. So they came up and they were inspired to do this. And it's funny. It's as I dug into Agile, frankly, as I think of historically just completely flubbered the concept of Agile and implementations, I've always wondered just what about it is wrong. And Chris, while I will argue it's the same thing as what you've talked about, that's the history of it. And what gets me is this is why I think Agile is bullshit here. And this is why I think consultants who get a hold of the Agile and try to sell the Agile concept, they're bullshit themselves, unless they understand where it came from. Because by not understanding these pillars, implementing it, all you're doing is implementing a Scrum framework or something like this, which, by the way, Scrum, although can provide agility, is not, well, I don't want to say it's not Agile, provides agility, but you have to be very careful on how you argue with that. So somebody coming in, getting paid $50,000 to teach people how to do Scrum from a 256-page book that costs like $15 is not Agile. And so that's where that's the root of my argument on Agile is bullshit, is because, go ahead.
No, I got it, right? Because I understand where you're coming from, but I would like to separate this into Agile capital A, right? And Agile lowercase a, meaning there's Agile, the thing that is being sold, that you buy the booklet, right? And all that crap. And then there's Agile, that we are a nimble organization that has a responsive IT component that can address changing business need. In other words, we have agility as a company, as an enterprise, versus we do Agile, capital A, with all the books and the Kanban board and all that stuff. Does that, or am I making up that distinction?
Oh,
I love it.
By the way, Phil is strangely silent right now.
Yeah.
yes.
Well, I mean, I was trying to figure out where you were getting to with this bit, right? I mean, to me, and I don't know, I'm not one who sat around and thought about where Agile came from. But if I were thinking about what it looks like from my point of view, right? It was like, is this not a response to waterfall? It was a response to these big overblown systems where everything got defined and we didn't get to the end because we got caught up in some process. And I get it as a response to that. But I mean, I get that what I think is your real complaint about this is not that things can't be fast, loose, and out of control, but that some people are using it as a cover for just bad practices or lack of discipline.
Yes.
And
if you make money by promoting bad discipline and lack of practice.
Yeah.
So if you step back, right, you said it started off in 2001, but this thing has caught up extremely fast in last few years, and especially when the new native digital companies like Google's and Facebook's of the world started becoming most active. So here is my experience when I work with large enterprises. Traditionally, you have legacy systems. They need business needs some features to be developed. If it goes through the regular process, it takes like numerous months for them to build something, and time to market is very high, right? They take numerous months and years to build something. They needed something faster, because in today's world, if you think of something, if you can't deploy in a matter of probably few weeks or months, then that idea becomes obsolete. So they needed a faster way to do that. When they looked around what's available, probably Agile has caught fire at that time and said, you know what, let's do Agile business, Agile product development, Agile software development. But what they forgot was Agile was not in the DNA of the company. It's a way people think. People needs to be smart enough to adopt that. You can't train legacy mindset people to become Agile overnight.
Well, that's right. I don't get to change culture overnight.
Yep. Period.
I think you're exactly right. You see the market dominance of companies like Facebook, Google. I mean, name your true tech company who adopt this culture of just delivering products consistently, trying to deliver quality. I'm going to be loose with quality right now, but delivering products, because you had that, was it Zuckerberg's run fast and break things, where quality was not an issue as long as you're developing products. But then he ultimately changed that to, was it run fast on scalable infrastructure, once he realized the large impact of that, that statement culturally. But I think that's where these Agile and like all the Agile consulting has come from, is all of a sudden you see tech companies, which I love seeing, and Agile and DevOps together. I remember seeing a presentation by a guy from Google at SRA that says, hey, Google doesn't do DevOps, nor do I think Google does Agile. A lot of these tech companies, how many tech companies have come forward? And I'm wondering, because I haven't heard Uber go, hey, we're agile, or we do agile. I haven't heard Google say, hey, we're safe. We do scaled out agile framework. Yeah. I haven't heard Uber say that. And that's where I get around. That's my thing around agile is bullshit, is because you got a top 4 selling something that your top technical companies, that the ones they're selling the service to, want to model themselves after, but yet those top companies don't do safe. They don't do Scrum. And I'm gonna be loose with that because they do representative types of management practices, but they're not doing what your top 4 sells specifically.
So where they start from is, I agree with you. They don't do pure agile or pure Scrum. What they start off with is they try to understand what their company culture is. Then they take something which is closest available, but they customize it to their need, their culture, their people, and to their own demand. And they call it probably something else. And all of a sudden, if that company becomes successful, everybody starts following, saying that this is the next big thing. And rest of the corporate world, starts running towards that. And then consulting firms will start building practices around that. And people who have read those books would say that, we will help you build this particular agile practice. And they have never done this in their life.
I don't want to go into it, but the best agile book is? Do you know what the best agile book is?
Nope.
Tell me more. Is it an actual book?
It is an actual book. You can find it. I got to find the date it was written. This one I don't have remembered. Oh, it was written in 2009, but I guess it was after the Agile. But before the Agile Institute came was like 2011. But it's called Learning to See. Does that look right, or is that backwards on the video?
No, that's good.
That's right.
Okay, so backwards. Has anybody heard of this? Does anybody know what Learning to See is?
No.
Learning to See was one of the first books put out about how to do value stream mapping. What is Agile? What does people talk about at the end of the day in Agile? Like anybody go to agilemanifesto.org, you'll see have their 4 pillars, right? Individuals of interactions, working software, customer collaboration, responding to change. Chris, as you talked about lean, once you get back into, and it's funny, there's a good argument that even the 12 things they have in there are comparable to Deming's 14 points, which is in lean, where this came from. I'm getting back to a point where it's like you get the Scrum and like these agile frameworks. This is why I call bullshit on most agile. Because people want to go back to a project management thing and do something new, yet disregard the fundamental aspects, and you go back to the culture of how this operates. Is like how the human business process operates.
So look, my discipline is mostly enterprise architecture, right? It has been for most of my career. And this is a discipline that has innumerable, many, a plethora of infinitesimal amount of frameworks, right? Frameworks out the wazoo for how you do it, right? How you're supposed to do it. And picking up on something Shashi said, right? There is no one way to do many of these things, right? There are many different ways, and they have to be fit for purpose, right? They have to be customized to fit your particular enterprise. I'll give you an example. I have a client right now. They have implemented in some parts of the enterprise agile frameworks, not scaled agile framework, but agile frameworks, right? That address daily meetings, that address how teams are constructed, how teams deliver work over time, et cetera, right? But they also do waterfall in other parts of the enterprise that are more suited to waterfall type constructs. One example, when you're dealing with highly regulated environments and industries, right? Agile as a capital A Agile as a framework, it has a hard time, right? Because regulatory processes can take a very long time to do. And it's very difficult to say, I'm releasing something that may or may not be complete, right, to the marketplace. And it may or may not pass a regulatory body. And in those cases, it's perfectly okay to say, look, this doesn't work for us. Waterfall works fine. Yeah. And so I would, in that particular case, actually suggest that a consulting company that comes in and attempts to sell scaled agile framework, get all these manuals, buy these books, right? And says you need to do agile capital A, and we're going to reorganize everybody and do everything. Yeah. I think there is an element of bullshit to that, right?
I love how you put that, because this whole going against waterfall, I came from the defense contracting side. And by the way, I want to let you know before I get into the rest of the thing about this defense contracting, the Department of Defense has released a guide that says Detecting Agile BS. Dead serious. DIB guide Detecting Agile BS. It was last modified the 3rd of October, 2018. But as you get down to that, there's a recognition at the defense level that, hey, this works, but here's how to detect whether your consultant's a full shit. But that's right. It's like, how do you, waterfall is a risk mitigation technique. There's a lot of things in aircraft, for example, you have to think up front. You can't just componentize and build. You got to think about some redundancy in some in some of your systems that you require waterfall methodology. And so asking yourself, what way do you manage the project from product to project? Which product to customer? I think that's a new book, by the way. Which one you use? Sorry, my reference to books.
Agile is not completely bullshit. What's bullshit is the way Agile is being implemented within an organization. They need to be careful. It fails more often than it is successful within large enterprises. Do we agree?
Is there data to support that? Or is that just a made-up statistic?
Yeah, it is. I fall under 83.5%, whatever Bill said. We make data within 83% of the data is made on the fly.
It sounded plausible, right? So
yeah, it is.
Yeah. It's funny about that. I tried looking for some data. And it's interesting, like, Chris, you talk about frameworks and EA, and the Agile itself, like the concepts of meta model. And you think about Togaff and Zachman, a lot of them are meta models, and they're not an explicit implementation of something. Scrum has Agile philosophies. I mean, heck, Jeff, one of the authors of the book, signed with the initial Agile Manifesto. But it in of itself is a project management approach that values time boxing and short delivery spans for customers to ensure iterations, and it meets a lot of the philosophies, right? So as you get towards, like, does Agile work, does the quote-unquote Agile work, it'd be interesting to see if people took the big A Agile at it and said, okay, of our different project management philosophies, when we said, hey, we need to deliver at this budget and on this time, did our project management approach achieve that? It'd be interesting to see, even how do you measure that? Because if it's did we achieve that, that's one binary metric. There's also learning, because you think about the concept of Agile is, hey, where we're starting may not be where we're ending, so we're going to iterate because we're going to learn towards the end. Whereas, some other project management philosophies assume that you know it all from the beginning.
I want to pull on a thread here, which is basically, Bill, you said at one point, I think in our pre-read discussion, you said something to the effect of, you alluded to it earlier also, that where the concept of Agile started matters. In other words, if it's rooted in something that is at its root just a sales and marketing slick, right? A reason to sell things, and that's how it started, then maybe it's bullshit. But I want to pull on that thread and say, like, does that actually matter at all? If it's useful, if it works, if you do it right and it works, does it matter if it's made up by a bunch of eggheads in a consulting office?
So I'm going to start on that, and Bill, you can shoot me down. So I think context matters, because once you understand the context in which whole concept of Agile was built, then you can relate your environment, your current context, and see how close to that other context it is. Or you may need to create Agile 2.0 for yourself to fit your context. So I think understanding context is extremely important. So you don't try to be a purist.
Exactly. And so, Shashi, I'm going to agree with you on that in the context. So I'm going to take two counterfactuals here. So Chris, let's assume I go in and I'm consulting for a client. I don't use the word Agile. And I change the name of the Scrum process to the Bill Bensing process. And I teach them how to do things between 2 weeks and a month. And
wait, time out. Is there a Bill Bensing process?
There is now.
just checking.
So there's no Bill Bensing process. There needs to be. But like I changed the Bill Bensing process, and let's say all of a sudden they start meeting these customer metrics where when I go back, they're all of a sudden it's about individuals over interactions. They're getting working software out there. They are collaborating very close with their customer, and they're responding to change, right? Well, if they knew nothing about Agile Manifesto, did I help them deliver in a circumstance? Yes. And so to a bit of the point, do you have to understand Agile to achieve the background, the context to achieve it? There is a clear argument that says no, but where I go is when you're selling Agile. And so to Shashi, this is where you're going. If I'm going out and saying, I'm going to turn you into Agile, but all I do is borrow a Scrum book and then charge you $30,000 over the next 5 months to do it, that's so devoid of context that you don't know why. And the biggest thing is it's all about behavior. And, culture is a set of behavior. And just telling you have to meet 15 minutes every morning and every Friday.
Hold on a second, right? So again, putting this in context of if I am a company, I would be asking you to help me implement Agile, right? Because I have perceived some problem in how I'm currently delivering.
Yeah.
Or someone has convinced me that there's a problem with how I'm currently delivering. So Phil, not to put too fine a point on it, but you have probably seen more methodologies than the other three of us, right? In terms of
living a long time, right? That's all. It's just living a long time, and those things come, right? I mean, and all are a response against the thing before. And I'm with you on that spot, right? Which is, this comes out because someone says, "Hey, this isn't going fast enough," or "We're not delivering," or kind of where Bill was in the beginning of this thing, which is, we started down this path, but the environment changed, or we missed a requirement, or something comes along the path, and we just feel like the process we're using doesn't respond quickly enough.
Yeah.
I think this is how things go from one spot to another. But the thing is, I can sense in you guys in particular that there's a real passion for something being wrong here, right? There is something that doesn't smell right about what's happening here, and it feels like it's all slick. It feels like it's all form and no substance. And so then the question becomes, can we suss that out? Can we figure out what the core is that we do need to have, and how do we go in and detect this BS and cure it when we need to?
Yeah, I think Phil, you mentioned a great point. The whole genesis started why any enterprise want to adopt Agile is because business comes to them and say that, or they themselves realize, we are not two things. A, we are not delivering fast enough. Our processes are slow. B, are we delivering customer value? Once these are two fundamental questions are asked, then they look back, and an entire product development organization would go and see what are the possible solutions out there. Then they would go and look at Agile, Scrum, and all the frameworks, and whichever the highest number of books that has been published or blogs that has been written pops up in their Google search, and somebody would go and say, you know what, we need to hire a consulting firm which can help us with Agile or which can help us with Scrum. Then they would go and engage those guys, and they will come and try to change them overnight without realizing what is the context. Are we ready to adopt or undertake something like Scrum or Agile, or do we need to change the entire enterprise, or do we need to change a portion of it? You don't have to re-engineer the whole enterprise, because that's not going to happen at all.
Great.
So you used a word. Does this have some root, maybe root cause in like traditional business process re-engineering? In other words, something is not moving fast enough or working well enough, and so we are going to buy a program to make it go faster.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
The root of the consulting industry, right?
Maybe. Right. I mean,
change the context, but yeah.
Well, no, but I mean, like, look, I think there's some use in looking at traditional industrial engineering, right? And thinking about, my father's worked in the automotive industry, right? He's an industrial engineer. That's all about improving the process by which in his case, an automobile or parts of an automobile are produced more efficiently, better quality, not always necessarily faster, but improved quality. And I think that translates to value in sort of our modern terminology. And out of the end of that assembly line, or that metal press, you have something that someone is willing to pay a dollar figure for, and feels good about paying that dollar figure. And his entire job is about improving that process overall, right? And so I think there's something to say, like, yes, I would like to translate that approach to industrial engineering and apply it to IT design and delivery to meet a business process, a need, right? A need that derives from the business. And so whether it's a product or a service or some combination of the two, seems to me that really any of these methodologies is really about that. Am I wrong? Is there, because I say some of these things and sometimes I read what other people write and I'm just like, maybe I have it completely backwards.
I think you've made the great point. So you bring it back to industrial engineering. It's just, it's systems thinking. It's handoffs. It's just getting from value to next value to additional value. The concepts, the core beliefs are the same. Let's just take Agile. Like I go to the Agile Manifesto. When you look at that, you go look at Deming's 14 points, where a lot of lean, your TQ, and a lot of that stuff came out of. You can map almost all the 12 pillars to Deming's 14 points, and they're in different contexts. His is in a goods manufacturing. Agile Manifesto is in software manufacturing. It's all really the same stuff. And so it's funny, but where you're getting at is there is this core concept, this core basis of belief, of a core belief system on how this stuff comes about. And I think Shashi, where you give the context earlier, before you hit on this, is if that context is lost, then and this is me putting in, if you lose the context to why you're doing it, then what good is the actual deliverable itself, the Scrum training, or name your specific reference methodology?
Right. No, I 100% agree, and I think it's not really bullshit. There is definitely a need for it, but is Agile solution to your problem is something which needs to be closely looked at. And it's not just buying one book or hiring a consulting firm to just help us define something which ends up becoming a shelfware after spending hundreds and thousands of dollars. Or if you are really serious about it, try to think deep and then embark on the journey.
Well, I would like to touch on, the thing that Phil always brings it back to is, if you're the cat sitting out there on an agile team, right, in a value stream or whatever the case may be, right, and you are trying to deliver something, and you're looking around and you're thinking this is bullshit, right? Yeah, why did McKinsey sell us this crap, right? To pick on McKinsey, could be PwC, could be lots of people, right? Why did they sell us this crap? What's the message for them?
That's
Bill. Bill is the message. You're right. It's bullshit. You should quit.
Well, hey, I think it's Agile itself is not bullshit. So as I start with my premise that Agile is bullshit, that's my hyperbolic way of saying, frankly, Agile itself is firmly rooted in a lot of other practices that share the same core beliefs. But what McKinsey or PwC, or name your top 4, 5, 10, what they sold you is I don't want to say they sold you a bag of good that's useless. They just sold you something that was not contextually viable for your company.
Right. But you're on a team. You don't control that. So they have it. They spent the money. They're doing it. What do you do?
I pull up the Agile Manifesto. I lead from behind, and I start managing upwards my managers. I think that's the right way to do it. You pull a servant leadership attitude. Go get something like the book Learning to See. Go grab the Scrum book. Go get on the Agile Manifesto. Go look up the DIB. It literally, the government says detecting Agile BS. That's the name of the government deal. And hand this up to your managers and say, hey, start leading from behind and start becoming a servant leader and saying, listen up. McKinsey, they may have charged you $1.5 million. It's not working, but down here, we see some things. We see how it can work. Give me a shot, and I will charge you $1.5 million, and we'll make this thing happen. I think that's the best way for Agile itself to come to fruition, is the people who are the closest to the customer, or people who are closest to the work, to make decisions on how the work itself should progress to the endpoint.
I mean, Phil, you know people that are probably looking for jobs in IT development that know and are aware of Agile as a one of those things on the resume that you need to be able to say nowadays. I mean, what do you hear people talking about in terms of Agile capital A, or these frameworks, or any of this sort of thing? Is this something that they feel they need or they believe in?
I want to say I have never heard the passion for Agile in any other context that I have in this room here right now, right? Nobody is like this about it. I mean, that's not a thing that I come across, right? I mean, I come across a bunch of passionate developers, but, the guys that I spend the most time with, they're interested in the same way that you are in getting the work done, right? Being useful. And if this is part of the system, they're all for it. But if it gets in the way, they go do something else.
I think that's the point, is engineers want to deliver software. And as you look at where the Agile Manifesto came from, it's a bunch of your lead minds in software engineering, through, I'll say modern computer science history. If you look at how far back some of their writings go, given that computer science is really like 70s, 60s, I won't go back to the 50s, but anyways, that's neither here or there. But it's really about engineers wanting to deliver a product to customer, do the best possible. So I think that when somebody at the top says we need a methodology for you to do better, you're actually subverting your engineers who they're trying to do the best with a culture and or a process, because it's usually I don't want to take culture out of it. It's the human system that's the failure that delivers a lot of the quality issues, not necessarily the humans themselves.
In summary, for me, A, it is not bullshit. B, it's not the solution to all the problem. You have to take the fundamental good practices, what it has to offer, and customize it to your context. Context is extremely important. Apart from just context, you need to understand your capability to adopt agile, and capability in terms of your people capability, your existing process, and your appetite to change capability, and the tools which can support agile is extremely important. Third, you need to be extra cautious when you're hiring a consulting firm. They need to have the right people who have done it in the past, and not the people who have read the book and are going to leave you with a bunch of shelfware. If they say they will help you build the agile, that's incorrect. They will help you fasten your process or improve customer value. So those are the few things that needs to be kept in mind. It's here to stay. Important is adoption.
Well, again, there's a lot of passion fits, and I think that's a good thing. I think, the thing is that the decision about what systems are going to be in use are typically made above your pay grade, right? And you're just walking into a situation and deciding how you can help. You use what you can. I mean, and I think that's probably, it's as simple as that. But, I like this idea that the healthy skepticism is useful in this environment, right? I mean, in the end, am I really getting to an end product on time? Am I getting what I said I was going to deliver, or am I in fact delivering? It's too easy, I think, in this space to spend most of your time justifying your own existence and not delivering value, and that's what you're trying to get away from.
Amen.
Yeah, good point. Final thought, Bill?
Man, it's hard. Agile is bullshit, but it's not at the end of the day. I'm so passionate about it just because you get back to, me, the executive in my mind, you want systems, you want standardization and things like that. So I see how people easily, and I've been part of it, easily falls into this. Let's grab somebody who knows about this, but we don't have any change. But also the engineer in my mind is, keep your fancy shit to yourself. Just get me with a customer, and I will deliver quality as we go through this. And here's the things I need to get doing. I think the biggest conversation around Agile is it's not just necessarily top down nor bottom up. It's that conversation in the company. The healthy skepticism, as Phil has pointed out, that conversation needs to happen. And I think what epitomizes companies who are hiring Agile coaches and Agile consulting is they're probably, and I say this with 99.99% certainty, not having those conversations, which is the root of why I believe itself Agile is bullshit, because there's probably not the conversations happening with the companies hiring those folks.
Interesting. I mean, for my part, I think it comes down to delivering value, which we talked about. I think it can be done in many different ways, right? You think you could do it waterfall or not. And I think it has to be fit for purpose. And, I am with you that there tends to be an overemphasis on slick marketing and sales by consulting firms. So I'm somewhere in the middle that, maybe the way it's sold and marketed is bullshit. But, if you are getting results from it, it's hard to argue with the scoreboard. So, all right. Well, hey, listen, thank you guys. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Phil. We lost Shashi, but thank you, Shashi, wherever you are. I'm Chris Lockhart. Thank you. We'll see you next time.
Groovy.
Cool.